Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of African Battle Royale. Let's get right into it. Eswatini will be invading West. So it turns out there was actually a secret clause in the treaty between Mauritius, Madagascar. I always forget Mauritius is part of the Union, so I wanted to acknowledge they are part of the Union. And Eswatini. Eswatini had to have basically has to declare war on any country that Madagascar or Mauritius wants them to. In this case, they have to declare war on their closest ally, or former closest ally, Lesotho. And so they're going to start invading into Lesotho, and let's just say they are not very strong. So they get this far before Lesotho starts pushing them back. But obviously Mauritius, Madagascar is going to be helping them. And they're going to help them push back into Lesotho, and a lot of troops from Mauritius, Madagascar are going to be arriving here. But then rebellions will start to take place all throughout Eswatini and also in the occupied territories with a lot of the soldiers changing sides. The leader of Eswatini is going to be thrown out of office. Literally, he's thrown out of the window of his office and he dies. This war has been turned around as now Mauritius, Madagascar is being invaded by Eswatini. And you know that Zambia would not pass up on this opportunity to gain some land. So they're going to also gain some land, and Mauritius, Madagascar is going to lose all of their land in the mainland. But that's not all, because Zambia basically proposes to these two, hey, Mauritius, Madagascar is a pretty dangerous country. Why don't we just make sure they don't ever do that again? And all three of them agreed to this. Tanzania, Somalia, who's right here, will basically plead, saying, hey, please, hey, pretty please, don't do that, that's bad for peace. And they're like, we don't care, as they land in southern Madagascar. And these two were pretty recently allies, and now their relations are starting to get strained as Zambian troops start destroying Madagascar, as well as landing in Mauritius, because, yeah, that's also a thing. But the citizens of Tanzania want a separate invasion of Madagascar to take place, and so the government will have to do it because it's popular. So they'll take this part of Madagascar and let the coalition take the rest. And these are the new borders of that after the war. Sudan will be invading West. But before that can happen, they're obviously going to need a reason to betray their allies, and that is that this Sudanese government is a very much puppet government. And the Sudanese people will not like that, and they will start rising up in large numbers, especially on the coast where they were invaded previously. Right now, Ethiopia and Egypt are sending in troops to help the Sudanese government, obviously, but they're not probably sending troops in the amounts they should because they kind of want to keep them. They're kind of planning to start another war with the Dark Blue Alliance. But this Sudanese rebellion is starting to pick up ground, and pretty quickly it has the whole country. So minus a few areas on their borders with Ethiopia and Egypt that are still controlled by the old government, Sudan is now basically under a new government, and they're going to start invading west into Egypt. And their invasion is going decently well for being a country that literally just formed. But obviously they're not going to do that well, and so they're stopped by Egyptian forces as Egyptian and Ethiopian forces fully send themselves into the country. At this point, Tanzania, Somalia demands a stop to this. Egypt and Ethiopia just say no, and that's the final straw as Tanzania, Somalia sends troops into Ethiopia. And Ethiopia was not ready for this. Like when I say not ready, I mean like they legitimately didn't think it would happen. Like they didn't even have a war plan drawn up. Like they were super not ready for this. And they're going to lose like half their country super quickly. And they're going to subsequently pull all the way out of Sudan, leaving that theater of the war to Egypt as they continue to get invaded, but the invasion is slowing down. Despite the fact that they're also fighting Egypt and losing, especially in the north, the Sudanese forces will chase Ethiopia back down, taking pretty much the entirety of the actual part of Ethiopia that is modern-day Ethiopia, which just leaves essentially the parts of Ethiopia that are controlled, that are populated by people who don't want to be part of Ethiopia, so they will rebel, and the Ethiopian government is not going to be able to stop them, which means that Ethiopia has essentially just switched sides in this war, and Egypt no longer has any allies. But Egypt will continue to fight as forces from Sudan and Ethiopia, as well as the Dark Blue Alliance, start heading up into Egypt, and eventually Egypt realizes that this is not going to be a beneficial war for them if they stay in it much longer, so they will officially leave the Brown Alliance and the war. And Sudan gains a healthy amount of land from Egypt. Morocco will be invading southeast. This means they'll be invading into Algeria. And the reason Morocco is invading into Algeria is basically because they hate Algeria. But Morocco will start by invading in these regions into Algeria. And let's just say Algeria is not doing well, as they immediately lose all of their western desert territories that there's not that many people living in, but it's still frustrating for them. And, of course, Morocco is getting support from not only Senegal and Togo, but the rest of the Dark Blue Alliance. So Algeria is definitely in for a doozy here. Morocco struggles to actually invade in the north, where there's kind of a stalemate along the very northern coast. But in the south, it's a different story, as this highly deserted region, perhaps with the help of Nigerian logistics, is making it very easy for Algeria to be invaded. And once Egypt officially states that they're not going to help Algeria in the war, Algeria will surrender. And Morocco is quickly becoming one of the most powerful countries on the continent. Also, Nigeria got some land out of that. That's strange. Ethiopia will be facing a rebellion. So it turns out the government of Ethiopia, which is now led by South Sudanese people, is not popular amongst the people of Ethiopia. And so the people of Ethiopia will rebel and basically form a massive eastern rebellion. Obviously, they claim the rest of Ethiopia as well, not just the parts that are actually Ethiopian. So they'll start invading into the rest of Ethiopia, and Somalia will once again tell them to stop, and Ethiopia will once again say no. And then Ugandan and Somali and Tanzanian forces will start working their way into Ethiopia, notably not just in the regions that are under rebellion, but also the non-rebellious regions, which makes a lot of countries that aren't in Africa wonder whether or not this is actually a peacekeeping mission or if this is just a greed mission. Either way, Sudan will join in on their own and start separate invasion into Ethiopia. That is also going well. The rebellion and the main government of Ethiopia refuse to team up, which basically guarantees that Ethiopia will eventually fail. Okay, here's the division of Ethiopia. An interesting thing to look at is this gray line here, because the Tanzanian politicians within Tanzania, Somalia, required this land to be given to Tanzania instead of Somalia in order for this treaty to go through, which angers the Somalians, and now a lot of them are calling for independence from the Union. Guinea-Bissau will be invading southwest. So I don't know how southwest this is, but we're going to make this do, because why not? So they're invading quote-unquote southwest into Sierra Liberia. And this is basically just because the newly elected president of Guinea-Bissau quickly becomes a dictator, and they want to show off their strength. Obviously, the Dark Blue Alliance will start invading into Sierra Liberia over here, or not obviously, but they do, as the Ivory Coast also joins in. And at this point, Guinea-Bissau isn't really the one doing most of the work, but they are doing some of it. And at this point, the war is basically over. Okay, this is the new borders of what used to be Sierra Liberia. And the reason that Mauritania gave some land to Guinea-Bissau is they actually originally signed a treaty that looked slightly different from this, and then they exchanged land afterwards. Sudan will be invading south. So in the betrayal of a century, Sudan is invading into the Dark Blue Alliance. Their people are upset about a bunch of stuff, namely how the Dark Blue Alliance has kind of been abusive to them, and they are ready to get their revenge. And they enact it quickly by taking advantage of the fact that Ethiopians don't like being under Somali rule, and basically letting them govern themselves instead of occupying them. Shortly after this war starts, Egypt will join the side of Sudan. They've hated each other for long enough. It's time they work together. And at this point, things start going hilariously badly for the Dark Blue Alliance until they can actually get their act together and start finally pushing back. And now they're actually doing really well, which is the opposite of how they were just doing, which was really badly. However, things are not all peachy for them, as, first of all, Zambia will quickly join in the war, seize the Tanzanian claims of Madagascar, formally annex them into their territory, and then leave the war. So that was a major embarrassment for Tanzania that kind of makes the Tanzanian citizens upset, but especially makes the Somali citizens upset because they feel like they're the ones doing all the work. And all of a sudden, Mogadishu is like on fire with rebellion. And that rebellion spreads to Somaliland and just in general the rest of the main part of Somalia, as well as the part of Ethiopia that's inhabited by Somalis. Just all of Somalia is in rebellion. This obviously allows the Red Alliance to start just plowing through. And all of a sudden, Rwanda announces that Uganda has invaded into them, even though they haven't, and starts an invasion into Uganda. And without their allies here to help them, this invasion will be swift and complete, and Uganda will be fully taken by Rwandan forces as the Dark Blue Empire is starting to collapse, with them officially not having any land outside of their territory, and Somalia having fully rebelled. Somalia, Tanzania is now officially two separate countries, Somalia and Tanzania. This has been a long time coming. Another all of a sudden happens when Congo decides to invade into Cameroon just to take it over. And at this point, Tanzania sees no point and they leave. And besides giving Somalia independence, the only thing Tanzania has to do is give away that little bit of land that Somalia had claimed. But anyways, that's going to do it for this episode. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.